Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Microsoft 365 Copilot for Finance, update January 2025. My name is Alejandra Cabrales, and I will be your moderator today. Presenting for us today, we have Russell Hercules, Marek Roletsky, Wayne Wilson, James Edwards, Paitan Say, and Alejandra Cabrales. Russell, over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Alejandra.
I'll start today's presentation with the investments we have made in our Outlook add-in, a tool focused on improving the collections experience for finance professionals or those who interact with customers regarding accounts receivable matters. As a reminder, the Copilot for Finance Outlook add-in allows customers to summarize and compose emails with the help of generative AI, quickly gain context about a customer through an ERP integration, share documents such as outstanding invoices and account statements, save critical correspondence and author notes for increased transparency, and update the target ERP directly with the latest invoice dispositions and relevant contact details. Since our last Tech Talk, we have made a number of significant improvements to the product first. We have expanded our ERP support to include Business Central SAP and for all other ERPs with support for REST APIs and OAuth authentication, we offer a custom connector. Second, for customers who want to quickly evaluate the product, we offer a demo mode that does not require ERP integration. Most recently, we have improved our email summarization to include ERP attribution. In the email summary, we now include ERP-specific references to the account balances, along with invoice due dates and amounts, when an invoice number is referenced in the body of the email thread. Now let's take a look at the Business Central integration.
Alpine Ski House is one of Contoso's top customers. Contoso has recently been in contact with them regarding an outstanding balance spanning multiple invoices. Alpine has previously promised to do some research and reach out to Contoso with their findings. Megan, an accounts receivable coordinator, communicates with customers via Microsoft Outlook regarding a myriad of accounts receivable topics. At the top of her inbox today is an email from Alpine. Prior to the use of Copilot for Finance, Megan would have to spend time switching to Business Central to research this customer before replying with an impactful response. Now with Copilot, she will be able to remain in the flow of work and quickly get to a resolution. Let's see how. With Copilot for Finance launched as an add-in on the right-hand side of her email, she is presented with the key tools to help her get to work. First is a summary that provides her with a concise recap of the email's content enriched with citations directly from the Business Central integration designed to provide her with key insights into the customer. With these tools, she is quickly able to identify the customer's outstanding balance along with details regarding each invoice referenced. Next, she recognizes Copilot for Finance has identified Alex as a contact in Business Central. She selects his contact card to review additional details. From the email body, she observes his title has changed. From Copilot for Finance, she is able to quickly make a change without switching context back to Business Central. Her next step is to drill down into the customer details of Alpine Ski House. She selects the account card and navigates to the list of outstanding invoices to update the dispute status of one of the invoices referenced in the email from Alex. With the update completed and a quick review of the aging history, Megan is ready to respond to Alex. Given what has been requested by Alex, Megan needs to reply to him with a copy of an outstanding invoice. Once again, Copilot for Finance can save her valuable time by giving her direct access to the invoice attachments, avoiding the tedious process of switching back to Business Central, downloading a copy, then having to manually attach the document to the reply. With Copilot for Finance, Megan is more efficient and more in control. From the tone of the email, Megan can tell Alpine is growing a little frustrated with this particular accounts receivable matter. Because Alpine is a valued customer, Contoso wants to maintain a healthy business relationship with them. Megan takes the initiative to proactively provide visibility into the matter with others. She drafts a quick note to her peers who may also interact with Alpine, informing them that it might make sense for Contoso's account management team to reach out and smooth things over with Alpine. Finally, Megan is ready to reply to the email. With Copilot for Finance, she can leverage email composition tools to draft a respectful and tone-appropriate email to best address the situation. She can also drive additional clarity with the customer by including a copy of their account statement retrieved as a PDF directly from Business Central. If she is not happy with her first draft, Megan can iterate until she is satisfied with how she wants to communicate with the customer. Copilot for Finance allows users to modify the tone and length of your correspondence. The draft response considers the context of the body of the email, regardless of complexity, and is relevant to the topics at hand. If changes are needed, Megan remains in control and is able to edit the draft correspondence before it is sent to the customer. With Copilot for Finance, Megan was able to gain context on the customer's standing and specific needs, leverage the native integration to update Alpine's records, and compose a contextually relevant reply, all within Outlook. Let's take a look at what has happened in Business Central while Megan was helping Alex address his concerns on behalf of Alpine Ski House. As you can see, the contact update reflects accurately within Business Central, along with the new dispute status on the invoice Alpine is unwilling to pay. Business Central remains the single source of truth, while team members who handle accounts receivable can remain more agile and productive in the Outlook.
Our goal here is to keep our customers in the flow of work, especially in accounts receivable scenarios. So this is not limited, obviously, to an accountant, but it could be someone in customer success or a project manager, anyone who has cause to interact with their customers on accounts receivable matters.
Thanks, Russell. All right, today, so I'm going to walk you through a demo of our data preparation, which is a new feature, and some of the updates that we have to the reconciliation of data in Excel using Copilot for Finance. So when we first began this process, we started with a solution for Copilot for Finance that addressed reconciliation of data in Excel. That in our core solution, we were addressing 3 of the 6 steps in the reconciliation process: matching, classifying, and the report. But our overall goal, as we've stated before, is to eventually support all 6 steps of this process. And our intent was to move from not just being able to provide an assistive solution, but ultimately to get to an agentic solution where you would have support for this process that included the automation and other capabilities that an agent brings to the overall reconciliation flow. So what you're going to see today in terms of capabilities is that we are now going to be, through the addition of the data preparation capabilities, that we're moving more, not just from the match it and classify and report, but also into supporting the validate and prepare step of the process. So that is the capabilities that I'm going to start off with this demo, and look forward to any of your feedback overall or questions later in the session. And then now I will take over and start sharing. So what I'm going to do today is I have started with 2 sets of data that I'm going to do as part of this reconciliation process. And I'm going to give you some context and walk you through what the data is. So in this demo scenario, I am an accountant in Northwind Traders. My company uses multiple financial systems. And for example, invoicing in Canada is handled by a homegrown application that is separate from the ERP system that tracks financials. Each month, I must manually audit transactions for tax purposes to ensure there are no discrepancies in the sales tax that's recorded between the 2 systems. And you can see the output here is what's coming from the ERP. And you can see here what's coming from the other system that I mentioned. There is a bit of a raw data extract. As there are many similar scenarios where I need to reconcile data, this process can take many hours. It's a frequent process that I do often. It takes several hours to not only complete the reconciliation itself, but just in that data preparation stage where I have to get the data ready to even start the reconciliation process. So what I'm going to do to make this process faster is use Copilot for Finance. And I will walk you through just a bit more of the context of the data as we go through this process as well. So I will click on the Copilot for Finance add-in here on the ribbon bar. And what you'll see is that not only do you have the initial 2 features that you've seen presented before, which is reconcile data and analyze variances, although analyze variances is not made available to everyone. But you'll see there are new things here as well. There's what we call this insights card, which I will collapse and expand again. There's the reconcile data, which analyze variances, which Mark will talk about, and then prepare data. Starting off with the insights, you'll see that it's giving us some insights into the data that it sees on the screen. It gives us some information about like top sales amount values, tells you some things about some of the customers, and then it even gives you suggested actions. One of which is format the range as a table, and the other is create pivot table with customer number and sales amount. Now, we all know when you're doing data preparation in general, ultimately you might want to work with the data in a pivot format. And that would be very useful to be able to click on this and have it create a pivot based on its understanding of the data. However, for today's purposes, we're not going to do that, but we will leverage the format, the range as a table, because that will be necessary to do the reconciliation process. The data does need to be in table format. And whereas this data from the ERP already is, this data that is raw data is not. Notice, by the way, that when I switch sheets, the context updated. And you saw that quickly happen where it's now, again, reading what's in the sheet. So what I'm going to do is format the range as a table. And once I do that, I will then walk you through some of the things that you can see that are glaringly an issue, such as missing customer names, zeros showing up in data. But we're going to talk about that more in a second. So I will click Format the Range as a table. And it quickly went ahead and changed the data into a table format. So now both my raw data extract and this posted sales tax ERP are in table format. But also what you'll see, as I mentioned, you'll see things like missing customer data and missing customer names. You'll see that we also don't want to include any rows where the sales amount is not a zero. We also do not want to include any rows where all the rows are equal to zero, such as what you see here. Note also that the data in the sales invoice column, which is here, has a dash inside of the name in the column. But in this posted sales tax ERP, there is no dash. So if we were to do a reconciliation, there would be a challenge because that dash would sort of create an issue. So we want to remove that. And then we want the values to be in 2 decimals because you'll see in this raw data, it's got floating decimals happening. There could be 1 decimal, 3 decimals. We want the transactions that are exported from the invoicing system here are in Canadian dollars, but in the ERP, they're in USD. And we need to convert that currency before reconciling. So to do that, what I will do is, again, I will use Copilot for Finance to help us in this process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Prepared Data. And this opens up the new capability, new features that I talked about. And what it's asking me now, it's providing me with a space here, a prompt for me to be able to instruct Copilot for Finance to take the actions necessary in order to make this data usable so that I can then do the reconciliation process. For the purpose of this demo, I've already created a prompt that addresses all of the items that I just mentioned earlier in terms of the issues with the data. You can see here, it says, this is my data preparation request. Fill in my missing customer names, all rows based on the customer number. So it'll look at where there are existing customer numbers for blank rows and add it in. And then it also says remove any rows with non-deductible sales tax, not equal to 0, remove the dashes, etc. So that's what we're going to do right now when I click it. So when I submit this, what we're starting with here in this prompt is me defining what my data preparation plan is. When I click submit, it then interprets what I've written and it generates a set of rules. And those rules are the details of this data preparation plan. And that's what's happening right now. So you'll see it's gone ahead and generated this plan. And then now I can review these and make sure this accomplishes all the things that I've set it out to do. I have the option to preview this with sample data. I could say, you know what, let me see how these rules affect a certain sample of data. So I could say start with a certain row, end with a certain row, and do a preparation plan. So it'll give me a sample. I could also add a new rule if I wanted to. If I said, you know, hey, it's missing a rule, I could delete one of the existing rules, etc. But I'm comfortable with what's written here, so I will go ahead with this. So now that I have my data preparation plan, I have all my rules, I will hit apply rules. And you'll notice if you just watch some of these things again, where these blank lines are, these zeros are, the dashes that are here in the invoice column, you'll see the effect happen pretty quickly. Again, so you can see right now, it's already gone ahead and removed those dashes. It made everything into the 2 decimals for me, it removed the zeros, and it created the values. So we are ready now to go ahead and do our reconciliation. So the next step is I will go ahead and back out here and I'll say reconcile data. One thing I do want to point out before I do that as well is that notice that it created a new sheet called sales invoices prepared. So it did not alter my original source data. I still have it here with the blank lines and the zeros and the dashes, but I can see here sales invoice prepared where it went ahead and created the new data for me. I'm going to now use this new worksheet, sales invoice prepare, as part of that reconciliation process. So I'm going to do it just a little reverse. I'm going to choose that sales invoice prepared. It found the table, it's already there. And then this one, I will choose the posted sales tax ERP, which is the first sheet. So I'm comparing this one and this one as part of the reconciliation process. And then hit next. It's analyzing the data to make sure that it's got the necessary fields. It comes up with where it sees the matching mapping keys and the amount. But one of the things I want to do to make sure we have a higher incidence of match, or let's say potentially matched items, I'm going to add a few other criteria into this data, into this mapping set. So I'm going to say adjust. And then here, I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to click on this. And notice I've got two options. And if you're not familiar with some of the updates, these are two of the items that we added in as well. So I now can delete these monetary columns. If I remove this monetary column, I can do a reconciliation that is solely based on the string data, the sort of descriptive items, as opposed to monetary amounts. And we've heard that's useful for certain things like certain types of payroll and HR related reconciliations and other types of reconciliations. But I will leave that column in for today, but I'm going to add match with tolerance. So what this does is when I click on match with tolerance, it allows me to specify a range. So I can say, like, for example, in this demo data set where I've converted the Canadian dollars and used the USD sort of exchange rate, things may change and the float may be different. So let's say that I can now say plus or minus. I'll do, let's say, $5. And then when I hit save, you'll see that it says this column is matching with the tolerance of +5. So when it looks at the corresponding amounts here and the posted sales tax ERP, it will say, hey, as long as this amount is within $5 range plus or minus of this amount, then it will potentially match. And right now we've shown this amount matching. We will also pretty soon release the date tolerance match capability as well. Then you get to the reconciliation report and you'll see you have a higher incidence now of potentially matched transactions because I've allowed for that float. And so this brings us then to now the completed reconciliation with our reconciliation description. And now you've seen the process. So we went from preparing the data from the raw data that was there originally, transforming it to a table using data insights, and then doing the reconciliation process through the reconciliation feature. So just a few words about some of the upcoming features that we're looking to do within the near term. So setup. So we are looking at retrieving source data from multiple files. So right now, currently you have that within, all data must be within the one Excel workbook, one file. We are looking at the how to retrieve source data from multiple files. Matching, defining multiple matching rules to categorize matching into matched or potentially matched. And this will give the user more flexibility as to how things match and where they show up. The report, we're going to do an extensive design of the report to add some additional improvements based on customer feedback. So this would include reconciled and unreconciled line item attribution, which means from the reconciliation report, you'll be able to drill back to the original source data directly, exactly where it is. And we will look to also append the source data information to show you what happened with that as part of the reconciliation process and where it can be found. So you'll have full transparency in both directions, and some other customizable report grouping configuration and additional reference information where we'll let you bring forward some of the additional source data that may not be a part of the reconciliation mapping process, but it's just good contextual information to have on that output. We're also looking at adding the ability to have single source reconciliations, and then also from a single file as opposed to two sources, and then also adding the 3+ sources and beyond. And then finally, agents obviously is a big set of our intended goals. So we will look to also add in that automation and other capabilities that are provided by agents. And now I will hand off to Mark.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So my name is Marek Rolecki, and I will cover today variance analysis. So let me start with one slide of introduction. So that's another scenario which we have been demoing before, but just to refresh, so what it is about. So variance analysis in general is a very crucial process for financial planning and control. It's helping to assess almost every aspect of organization performance. And professionals spend a lot of time in Excel applying traditional manual or semi-automated methods to perform variance analysis that surface multiple challenges. And obviously, with our variance analysis feature, we wanted to overcome those challenges and what those challenges are. So, first of all, the processes around variance analysis are time consuming. So, identifying and calculating variances across multiple lines, periods, and other dimensions is labor extensive, and manual operations are error prone. Right? So, manually manipulating with data always increase the risk of making something going in the wrong direction. And obviously, standard variance analysis often stops at identifying variances, but lacks deeper insights into root causes or patterns without significant additional effort, what means that in most of the cases we are talking about limited analytical depth. And last but not least, difficulty in scaling. So as the business grows, managing and analyzing large data that becomes cumbersome and may even exceed Excel's native capabilities, limiting the ability to perform timely variance analysis. So we definitely have a plan for that, and we wanted to work with external data sources with data at rest without necessity of bringing that to Excel. So in general, our main goal of for VA is to reduce to minimum time needed for variance analysis and writing up the summary with interpretation and explanations over those done calculations, obviously minimizing the risk of omissions and inaccuracies. So just to let everyone concentrate on understanding the why behind the data and driving better business instead of wasting time on manual tasks. Let me quickly take you through the demo. Move to Excel, and just to give you a sense of what you will be seeing. So I will walk you through that from the perspective of a junior financial analyst, again, that's from Northwind Traders. And we are somewhere in January, right, when as the junior financial analyst, I was tasked with assessment of our sales execution performance just after receiving the December financial figures. So as I said, so we are in January, so it's high time to look into all the key metrics, to identify outliers, all those different areas where we may have underperformed, or maybe those where we exceptionally overperformed. So this is a critical step in preparing our variance analysis for management review. So typically, this process would involve manually going through rows and columns to put all the data together from our budgets, forecast, and the actuals. Of course, comparing those and trying then to make a sense of the variances. And today I will demonstrate you how we can use Copilot for finance to streamline that. But let's quickly start with looking at the data. So what we have here in front of us is basically a data set in a form of aggregated view of sales by states. So as we can see, we have in columns multiple periods, and for each period we have separately actual and then forecast. And our goal is to analyze these variances to identify the main areas where performance deviated from expectations. So as I said, without Copilot, it would require to calculate those differences, highlight those, and then afterwards dig into that. But let's see how we can do that with Copilot. So I open it from the ribbon. And on the side note, right? So in order to get the data, which you can see here, you can use preview with sample data, and after hitting variance analysis, you will get the same set which I'm using for that quick walkthrough. So let's start analyzing. So as we can see, Copilot has already set the right context for the data which we are going to analyze. So we can jump directly to the next section where our Copilot gives us control over the variance summary through those parameters. So here is the place where we can use natural language instructions, and it can be used for multiple purposes. So for instance, we can force include multiple attributes which I would like to see in the summary, and regardless of their impact, because by default Copilot will be identifying for us only those main drivers which are contributing most in our variance analysis, but we can of course control that. And apart from that, I can also provide here instructions about narrowing down the set of the attributes which are coming from our financial data as they are being assessed to those which are important for me, right? So let's say, just for the demo purposes, that apart from those key drivers identified using the default process, I want Copilot to add all the product information to the summary. So what I expect will happen that everything what has any relation to product, product type, IDs, etc., will be added to the summary. And apart from instructions, we also have here possibility to control length, tone, and type of the created narrative by Copilot. So at the end, parameters are super useful and important, but they are optional. So I can say that I can jump directly to the step where I want to detect our variances. So as I said in the beginning, we are in the beginning or in January, and we have the financial data for December. And our ultimate goal was to understand, to find those outliers, right? And obviously, my highest interest would be in finding all those states where we haven't made our budget. So what I can instruct our Copilot to detect for us is show me all the unfavorable variances in December, right? So, and of course, here I can something goes wrong. Yeah, we've got it, right? And so as you can see, we can use in our detection natural language to define the criteria which needs to be satisfied in order to find the relevant data point in the data set. And of course, so I tried, that unfavorable, and honestly, that's something what should be working anyway, right? But as you see, I used another form to describe the same output which I expect, and obviously you can use way more sophisticated instructions, not like all negative, all positive, but also define a threshold that variances higher or lower than X%, etc., etc. And as soon as our Copilot parses the criteria and finds the relevant data point in our Excel, the data is being highlighted here. And what we can do then, right? We can either immediately jump to analyzing variances, but we can also display the analysis plan. So that's the first step in our agentic experience, where for now we are just presenting the plan which is being built by Copilot to illustrate all the references to data, attributes which are taken into consideration. And as you can see, all those different type of attributes like product ID, product type, and product are already considered, right? For our analysis. and then it shows us what kind of summary it will be created and the rule which will be used in order to calculate the variance. So we see that in order to have an understanding between negative and positive, we are using actual minus forecast. What else we can do here, right? And so especially for those who have seen previously that the experience, so the plan is not the only one, but we also changed the way how we present the identified data points. So apart from those references to row and the column in Excel, we also provide a nickname. So it's a Copilot generated more user-friendly natural language description of the data point. And of course, that's something what you can adjust if needed. So seeing that everything is good with my analysis, I can, with my plan, I can quickly start analysis. And what Copilot is doing is going back and using different set of formulas and approaches and assessments, makes first the list of the main attributes which were taken into consideration, and afterwards for each and every attribute presents the set of the key drivers. So as we can see, for most of them we have a single driver, and it's because of their major participation, or the weight in the overall analysis for this typical for this cloud type. But in some others, like product ID, where we have multiple attributes, multiple contributors assessed, we have multiple. And once we are presented with the summary, what we can do here, we can work with that to adjust, and using our own knowledge, we can add that, and afterwards publish as a comment. So with that step, it will go immediately to the cell where which was used for our analysis. So that's the experience as of today. But in a couple of weeks, it will be heavily redesigned, and you will see like completely a new way of working with our output from the analysis process, including aggregation of multiple analyses into ones and creating an executive summary on top of that. But we are here and with the functionality which we have as of today. So the next step which I can do here, which is super important, is to employ our Copilot to provide us with analytical view of the data. So in the reference section, I have Copilot create pivot table, and Copilot creates for us two additional worksheets. So in the first one, as you can see, it's very similar to the financial data which we are using for our analysis. So it's actually exactly the same, of course, pre-filtered. So we have a lower number of rows, but it's extended with the variance calculated for each and every data point which was of our interest. But what is even more important, that based on the table, we create a set of pivot tables explaining in details what other contributors were assessed for each and every attribute taken into consideration. So let's see, for instance, a product type, right? And as you can assume, right? So previously we have started from our pivot table, so we can repeat the same. And in the case where for instance, we want to go deeper to the second level of analysis and understand more what has happened behind the financial software, I can do that, right? And so I can change or even delete those analyses. What I need to do is to change the reference to our data point, which is being analyzed. So basically our pivot table, so product type. And afterwards, using the same parameters, I want to understand, right, what is the variance between actual and budgeted sales for financial software, and what were the key drivers there. So for this purpose, I can use the second approach for identifying our variances, and instead of natural language, I can use manual selection. So it's very useful for all the cases where we know by heart, like, immediately what are the what the pair of the cells we want to analyze, or which single cell, because this kind of analysis is also available, we want to analyze. And once I'm happy with my selection, I can hit analyze, and immediately I will get the result in the same way as previously presented for our main data. So just to recap, so what I did, I used Copilot for Finance to run the variance analysis process on our December sales data. And we started by identifying unfavorable, negative variances using natural language. And then we went a little bit deeper using manual selection to understand what has happened behind financial software and so on. So in general, like, to a long story short, like, so almost all the aspects except of creating narrative would be possible to be accomplished using like other tools, like, so even Copilot in Excel, or even manually building formulas, slicing, dicing data, playing with additional columns. But what you have seen that we can get the result with just few clicks, like, and that is the main purpose why we wanted to use that tool, right? But it's not the end, right? So this is the set of features and functionality which we have currently in private preview. So I believe that Wayne was mentioning that it's only available for a selected group of customers, right? But if you are interested in joining that group, like just watch the session till the end, when we'll be talking about conditions and the way how you can join the preview program. So with having that said, I will be handing off to James.
Thanks so much, Mark. So in the previous edition of our Tech Talk series, I spoke through the architecture of Copilot for Finance. Since then, we haven't had any major changes to the architecture, so I won't be recapping that today. But I do encourage you to go check out the recording online if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the architecture behind this product. Instead, for today, I'll focus on how we handle users' data in Copilot for Finance. This is a very common area of questions for users and customers, so we'll cover some of the common FAQs upfront for all of you. So starting off with diagnostic data. So for diagnostics, we will be logging metadata about usage, which includes things like how long executions took, whether scenarios were successful or not. We will specifically not be logging any user-entered input, anything with their prompts, any data from the user's ERP system or from their Excel sheets. None of that is being logged anywhere within Microsoft. And standard Microsoft data handling applies to all of this telemetry, which is available for us to debug issues. Another common question is around the data that's sent to large language models for these different scenarios that you've seen us walk through. So for each scenario, we are going to be sending different data that corresponds to that scenario. In collections, that will mean the email content and the user's prompts that are passed along with that. In the Excel scenarios that you saw, like data reconciliation, variance analysis, and data preparation, that would include user prompts, column headings, and a subset of the data from the Excel sheet. In all of these cases, none of this data is stored after being sent to the LLM. It's not used to train the LLM, and there's no risk of it being exposed elsewhere through being sent to Azure OpenAI for usage with Copilot for Finance. The next common question is around data persistence. So in general, no data is persisted by Copilot for Finance unless the user is taking the action intentionally to persist it. Today, we only support persistence of data for the collections use case that you saw, where users can save notes and emails to a Dataverse environment. In the future, we may support additional persistence for Excel scenarios, specifically around automation of our agents. But again, in these cases, it will always be a user-driven action to intentionally save something with transparency on where and what is being saved. And then finally, there are questions around the processing of data as these scenarios are being executed by users. So all data will be processed within the tenant's geographic boundary on Microsoft servers, segregated by tenant, so that there's no risk of data leakage between customers. And as I mentioned before, in all of these calls to the LLMs, the data is processed in these geo-specific servers and then will not be persisted after the request is completed. Yeah, that covers the common data handling questions. Feel free to post in the chat if you have any others. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wayne to talk a little bit about our private preview program.
All right, so just to give everyone an overview of our private preview program. So as Mark mentioned, and as I mentioned earlier, there are certain capabilities that were demoed today, variance analysis, data preparation, and the insights that are only currently available to those who are in our preview program. The preview program is a program that we offer that provides a certain set of benefits for customers. It allows them to obviously not only gain the additional productivity gains through those early adoptable features that I just mentioned, but it also gives you more direct access to the Copilot Finance team and to help provide input and feedback that helps us with our roadmap and just making sure that we have a good understanding of your and other customers' needs and requirements. From a participation perspective, it does not require a committed time frame that you might have seen in other preview programs where we're expecting you to meet, for example, every week and a certain amount of hours and a certain amount of test plans. But what we do ask is that you use the features, you use them as part of your general use in performing your finance professionals' tasks and processes, and provide us with feedback. And you can sort of create a schedule with the Haitham Saeed from the FastTrack program, who drives the customer engagement for the preview program. So it is a bit more customizable for you. And again, it is not as time consuming, I think, as we've heard from maybe some other more in-depth programs. But we would love for you to participate. And as part of that, we would ask that you are able then to, based on your experience, if you have a good outcome that can help sort of provide some reference for others who are interested to understand how it helped you, a quote from you that sort of supports that is definitely one of the asks as well. From a licensing and cost, as has been the case with the public preview, and will continue to be throughout this public preview period, the private preview program has no cost. There's no additional cost for these additional features or licenses. It's just your participation, and it's something that we would enable in your tenant once you have completed the necessary preview program agreement. When we share this content to you, you'll see that sign up here button that's there, and you can click on it, which will directly connect you with the ability to request a meeting with Haitham or one of the other FastTrack leaders in order to get the overview and start the program. From our requirements and limits, I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is the same requirements that we've had for some time. Again, there's no new additional licenses or new additional things that we've introduced at this point. But you'll see in here, there are some relevant links to just give you easy links to our existing online Learn documentation that will help you understand certain things like connectivity with SAP or with Business Central. So it's just a bit more of recapping what's already been published on our Learn site, and we'll continue to make this available. So from the enablement, as I mentioned, if you click on that button, it'll take you to the point of being able to connect with Haitham to request an introduction and overview and discuss the program. Then after going through the overview, you would be required to sign the preview program agreement. Once that's completed, as I mentioned, we would then deploy the additional capabilities and features into your tenant. And then the customer admin can work with us on that. And we then start the communication and sort of the testing overview, how you would want to approach that and how we would like to approach that. So just as the sort of next steps, just to sort of wrap this up, We will include this with the deck as well. This contains an overview of the process overall, and as well as the links to all the necessary documents and sort of next steps information that you might need. So hopefully this will help you in your journey. And, as Mark mentioned, we definitely look forward to having additional customers in our preview program. And certainly feel free to reach out to us with any questions or any interest. And with that said, I will turn it back over to Alejandra.
There were a couple questions on backend connectivity with Excel. Please keep in mind that the capabilities that Wayne and Marek both showed start with the assumption that the data is in Excel, but we are committed to providing some extensibility where we will bring that data to the sheets via your backend systems. So this is a clear ask from customers that we plan to deliver on. There was also quite a few questions regarding the availability of the sign-up link and the presentation themselves. As we discussed early on, they will be publicly available. I also saw a couple of questions that were specifically related to the capabilities inside D365 Finance versus our offering. Just as a reminder to the audience, Copilot for Finance is ERP agnostic, so therefore we are a separate product and offering compared to D365 Finance. The AI capabilities and the Copilot capabilities that you experience in D365 Finance are specific to that product and most typically specific to that UI. Our focus is very specific in the sense that we are targeting customers who are experiencing a lot of their day-to-day job responsibility inside M365 products, Outlook, Excel, Word, Teams, etc. So the goal here is really not for us to duplicate capabilities that you'll see in an ERP, but to complement work that is already being done outside of ERP, regardless of the backend. I'd say those are probably some of the top questions, Alejandra, but I tried to answer most, if not all, questions.
All right. Thank you, Russell. So with that, we can wrap up our presentation. Thanks for our presenters and to you, our audience, for attending our Tech Talk today. We hope you have a great rest of your day ahead.